Wait a minute, doctor. They've already sent the police out to write fines to Girl Scouts in multiple states. They are shutting down lemonade stands. So this has already begun.
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely bananas. And now I know they're talking about controlling if you want to grow some tomatoes in your backyard. You know, they're saying, listen, if you grow tomatoes in your backyard, something bad might happen with the tomatoes in your backyard. It may create chaos in the entire food chain. Therefore, you can't grow your own food. And once you can't grow your own food or clean your own water or, you know, control the air around you, you're basically a slave to other people and your health is not your own. So, I mean, it's becoming very scary out there. And you see the drug companies coming out, like you said before, with fish oils. All of a sudden, we discovered fish oils. My father, who's now in his 80s, when he didn't feel well, he had cod liver oil. They would just simply do the right things. A lot of things that people used to do 100, 200 years ago make a lot of sense. But now it's a $300 drug to have a better fish oil. The reality, fish oil is pretty much fish oil. And they changed it a little bit, so now maybe they'll take fish oil off the market because you have to have the prescription fish oil. And politicians want to be reelected. Politicians want money in their pockets. Politicians want nobody to run against them. Politicians don't even know what they're voting on most of the time. They simply have lobbyists tell them what's the best. Sometimes they don't really know. Sometimes they do know and look the other direction. But at the end of the day, look what's happened with health care. Is it getting better? No. Is it getting cheaper? No. Is it getting quicker? No. It's getting worse in all those metrics. But we were told, hey, don't worry. You don't need to know what's in the bill. But once you read it, you're going to like it. We don't like it, but it's law nonetheless. Same things with all these other things. For our own protection, we're too stupid. We need to be protected by our government. Therefore, I'm telling you, they're going to literally come and do household checks. What's in your refrigerator? How many Oreo cookies do you give your kids? Do you give your kids Doritos? We know about schools in Chicago where literally if you bring your own lunch to school, regardless of what's in that lunch, they'll throw it away. How dare you bring your own lunch? What were your parents thinking? Packing you an apple, packing you a good sandwich. What were they thinking? The school knows best.
And now the Pentagon is putting in San Antonio and other areas in one elementary a $2 million AI software computer camera to watch each child as they eat and track what they're eating and putting it in government reports.
Yeah, and the more the government has been helping us with food, think about this. 50 years ago, the government wasn't too involved in food. Nobody was obese. Very few people were obese. Since they've been helping us more and more and more with great food decisions, more and more people have diabetes. More and more people are obese. More and more people have chronic illnesses. And you hear the word managing disease. You don't hear the word curing disease or getting people better. You hear the word managing disease. Because when you're managing disease, you can keep people taking things for long periods of time. That's good for the healthcare industry. That's good for the drug industry.
Well, you're absolutely right, and expanding on this, they now have put Codex Alimentarius in place, and they actually tried to pass this UN law last year in the Food Safety Act. It actually said, adopt Codex Alimentarius. So they're actually trying to do what they've now done. Headline, hundreds of herbal remedies pulled from shelves under EU rule.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that there's no trial to say that those were unsafe. There was no trial to say, my goodness, somebody's having vitamin C or somebody's having vitamin B, that somehow it's unsafe for them. They were pulled simply because that's what the rule says to do. The rule doesn't have to make sense. It's simply the rule. Therefore, since we're harmonizing, which is a terrible word because it makes you think that something's going to get better somehow. Harmony sounds good. In government, most of the words that sound the best are usually the worst. When they start harmonizing things, it's not usually for your harmony. So they're harmonizing laws so that your laws now agree with foreign laws. Meanwhile, all your rights are being taken away to eat the things you want to eat, and your parental rights are being taken away.
Well, this is a big deal to have the Obama administration and Big Agra try to put through Codex Alimentarius. Let's break down what Codex Alimentarius will do if they're able to implement it here and what they're already starting to do in Europe on the other side. They industrialize the food, they adulterate it, then they make it illegal to not eat their food.
With their fingers crossed, everybody knows the war is over. Everybody knows the good guys.
Yeah, the good guys lost a few battles because we didn't know there was a war going on. But now more and more people know there's a war on for their mind, their property, their children, their ideas, their liberties, and we are rising. Now, if you think I'm joking, you can just search herbal remedies banned as new EU rule takes effect. You can also pull up the BBC. Normally I can find stuff really quick. I couldn't find it. Jaron couldn't, but I bet we'll find it soon. I remember the Daily Mail and BBC headlines. Hundreds of herbal remedies pulled from shelves. It's something like that. We're going to find it. The point is, this is really going on. Here's the London Guardian. This is from just a few days ago. Herbal remedies banned as new EU rules take effect. And it's actually from May 1st, so a month ago. Manufacturers and herbal practitioners say strict guidelines aimed at improving safety could force them out of business. And it goes on, and you can pull up the headlines. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mainline herbs are being pulled from the shelves under this UN agreement written by the big pharma production outfits, just like Big Agra openly is financing the food safety bill to shut down the farms and ranches where the Amish aren't even allowed to put out any dust. But big companies, they're given exemptions. They can put all the dust they want out, but the Amish, who aren't actually even hurting the land compared to the Big Agra, oh, they now have the bureaucrats being unleashed on them. And it's happening to everybody. Corey, this is a systematic monopoly being set up by the big mega corporations, and they're on record. The Department of Agriculture openly tells farmers and ranchers, get big or get out. This is about a consolidation. And all the third world food pouring in isn't enough to break the back of American farmers, a group the big banks have been waging war against for over 100 years in this country. They don't want us being independent. They want us, just like when old Joe Stalin went after the Ukrainian farmers. They always want to shut down people being self-sufficient. Why is that, Dr. Gold?
Well, it's control. Look what just happened in America on another front. You know, I'm a big American sovereignty first person. And here we are having a war, and by my definition, in Libya. The Congress didn't vote on it. The president says it's not a war. But NATO authorized it. So a force outside the United States has taken American troops into war, and yet nobody's recognizing that. And here we are now with something, the Codex, which is a World Health Organization through the UN, which they want to impose upon us. So the world will decide, you know, how we drink and what we eat and what kind of vitamins we can or can't have. So now we're going to have the world deciding what's right for you in Texas, what's right for me in California, what's right for Ted Anderson over in Minnesota. When do we give up sovereignty? When you give up your right to decide what you eat, what you breathe, what you drink, how you do those things, and when the rest of the world's now controlling your food supply, it's not a great place. But who would want to do this, and why would they want to do this? Well, drug companies obviously love having control over large groups of people. And if people are taking supplements or people are taking healthy food, your body's a gigantic chemistry set. And if you feed it the right things, it knows what to do with those ingredients. If the food is void of all those ingredients, all those nutrients, it can't operate well. So you need to seek things else outside, whether through nutritional supplements or through drugs. And so they get you in that trap where you don't have food that feeds you. You get fat. And that's one reason why people are so obese. They're starving. They're heavy, but they're starving. So you have things like the World Health Organization coming along with the UN, and I'm still trying to find out what the UN's good for. We pay an awful lot of money to have the United Nations, and I'm still waiting for it to do something that I'm happy about. But now they're telling us, remember in the 1980s, the world was going to be freezing. Then in the year 2000, the world's going to be hot. So they finally figured it out. Yes, the world will be cold sometimes. Yes, the world will be hot sometimes. So now it's going to be called climate change, so you can't exhale anymore. And cows are ruining the world because, you know, they have gases that they release.
And so what they're saying is any change on the planet is abnormal, but don't worry, they can genetically splice plants and animals and insects. That's safe when it's super dangerous. They can do all these, they can say Fukushima radiation at many times normal levels hit in the U.S. is now safe by raising the number of what they say is safe. But meanwhile, that evil carbon dioxide that's part of the life cycle, that's what they've got to tax. And it's the perfect thing to go after so they can then target all facets of industry.
Yeah, and you wonder why people are so paranoid all the time. You're told every time you breathe, every time you drive your car, every time you exist in the world, you're killing the world. And somehow that's a good thing, too. Because people, why do we need to have people on this planet, after all, Alex?
Well, let's talk about the eugenics program on the other side and why the system doesn't want people having access to vitamins and minerals. We'll be right back.
I get lots of requests to address a particular topic of interest to my viewers. None has come up more often and with greater frequency than GMOs. What people really want to know about is genetically modified food crops. I first want to say that I have a slight conflict of interest here. The biotech company that employs me doesn't make any GMO products, but they do make some of the tests for screening food products for GMOs. This is one of the reasons I've been somewhat reluctant to address this topic. I'm in a completely different division, but my company might benefit from increased demand for GMO screening of food products. Fair warning. The term frankenfood describes very accurately how some people think about transgenic crops. Science gone amok, tampering with nature in an amoral way, driven by greed and hubris. The reality is a bit more complex. While some manufacturers are seeking ways to increase profits through DNA technology, others are developing some very important modifications that nature is either too slow or unwilling to do for us. I'm going to do this as a pros and cons list because it is such a complex topic. Some examples of positive applications. Drought-resistant crops. While humans have been using artificial means to select for certain traits in our food crops for thousands of years, it's only in the last 2 decades that we finally have the technology to directly select the gene variants we like, allowing us to bypass certain natural limitations on what traits can be expressed together. One such innovation is drought resistance, or low water usage crops that are sustainable and can provide adequate nutrition. An example is a variety of maize that outproduces the wild type by 40% during extended droughts. Imagine the impact this could have for world starvation and poverty. Pathogen-resistant crops. This is the largest commercial application for transgenics. Roundup-ready varieties are resistant to herbicides that kill weeds that don't have the transgene. The reason this is a good thing is that the weeds use water, so weedless fields are more water efficient. There are also varieties of corn and soy that have genes for natural pesticides, normally found in a bacteria that colonizes plants and caterpillars. This reduces the amount of expensive and harmful pesticide that must be used to prevent crop loss. High-yield crops. The general global trend towards urbanization means that people are getting further from the crops that sustain them. This requires more transportation and infrastructure, which consumes more resources and causes greater environmental impact. The more food we can produce per acre, the shorter the transport distance required. Higher yields also keep the cost of food low and the availability high, so that people can afford to eat healthy, nourishing meals and stave off hunger and disease. Growth of agricultural land usually has a negative impact on the local indigenous environment. So transgenic high-yield crops can have a positive impact on the environment as well. Edible vaccines. If I made a Venn diagram of anti-vaccine and anti-GMO activists, I suspect there's not going to be a lot of non-overlap. So they're going to love this application. Progress is being made on introducing vaccines into plants, especially fruits, although potatoes are also very useful. The idea is that they would be an incredibly cheap, easy to transport, and easy to administer way of vaccinating populations in remote areas or areas affected by poverty and infrastructure problems. Green production. One of the possible alternatives to oil is biomass or plant energy production. Former President Bush advocated for switchgrass cellulosic ethanol production, a resource that could be cheaply harvested and would provide a seamless near-term solution to our dependence on petroleum. There's only one problem. The conversion of cellulose to ethanol isn't very efficient. Enter biotechnology. Cellulose hydrolysis is the current rate-limiting step. We can enhance that process with enzymes called cellulases that split apart the long chains of cellulose into short sugars. Introducing that enhanced cellulose pathway into a bacteria may result in bioreactors that eat lawn clippings and generate biofuels. So that's the potential upside of GMOs. What about the objections to genetic engineering of food crops?